We all know Malaysia for its vibrant festivals, but tucked between rainforest and reef, it hides islands and peaks that seem almost otherworldly. Sipadan, for instance, rises nearly 600 meters from the seabed and hosts such dense schools of fish and turtles that divers say the ocean becomes a living wall. On land, Mount Kinabalu shelters carnivorous pitcher plants found nowhere else and bursts with orchids that defy altitude. Colonial streets and temple-laced peaks conceal secret murals and a pagoda so intricate it seems to glow at dusk. On Penang Hill, rare highland rainforest pockets cling to granite outcrops, a phenomenon that in Malaysia supports cloud-like microclimates found in only a few tropical islands worldwide. Do you know that Penang Hill hosts cooler temperatures and endemic orchids because Malaysia's equatorial uplift creates its own weather patterns? From the colonial charm of the funicular's old stations to the moss-laden trails, the hill feels like a living museum of ecology and history. Morning mists drape the canopy and reveal orchids, pitcher plants, and the elusive dusky langur, moving silently between trees. Take the trail that descends toward the Botanic Gardens, and you can see how the hill feeds fresh water into Penang's lowlands, shaping the city's parks. This natural watershed helped Georgetown flourish, linking Penang Hill's cloud forests to the island's urban tapestry and colonial streets below. Walk past tea terraces and roadside stalls selling tropical fruit, and you'll find viewpoints that frame the sea, ferries, and the blue silhouette of the mainland. The contrast is striking. Ancient rainforest giving way to a buzzing UNESCO town, where street art lines lanes that once served spice traders. Kek Lok Si's pagodas can be seen on a clear day, another example of how sacred spaces and natural highlands interweave on Penang Island. Locals climb for sunrise not only for the view, but for the rare chance to breathe cooler, clearer air and watch clouds roll over urban rooftops. Researchers have cataloged plant species here that exist nowhere else in peninsular Malaysia, and conservationists guard these fragile plots fiercely. Community guides lead night walks to reveal glowing fungi and nocturnal mammals that vanish when dawn brings tourist crowds back to the hilltop cafes. Hidden stairways and century-old residences whisper stories of planters, colonial scientists, and local families who shaped the hill's cultural mosaic. Penang Hill is not just a lookout. It's the island's lungs, a bridge between limestone cliffs, city life, and the open sea. The more you climb, the more the island's story unfolds. Geology, culture, and ecology braided together in ways few places in the tropics can claim. Stay with us, and we'll descend into the streets of Georgetown to taste the recipes that grew from these very hills. Sipadan Island rises from the seabed as Malaysia's only true oceanic island, a 600-meter volcanic pinnacle bursting with an almost unimaginable concentration of marine life. Do you know Sipadan is one of the very few places on Earth where thousands of green and hawksbill turtles come ashore to nest, and where entire schools of barracuda spin in hypnotic tornadoes around the reef? Beneath the surface, a sheer wall drops into blue infinity, plastered with hard corals that host everything from tiny gobies to massive bumphead parrotfish fish. Currents funnel nutrients from the deep, creating a permanent banquet that feeds resident reef sharks, big-eyed trevally, and resident sea turtles. Divers arrive at dawn to watch swirling fish clouds at Barracuda Point and glide past turtle caves at Turtle Tomb, names that hint at both spectacle and secrecy. Sipadan's protected status means visitor numbers are capped and permits are tightly controlled to keep this underwater metropolis healthy. That conservation ethic connects Sipadan directly to nearby Mabul and Kapalai, where muck divers study rare critters and community projects support reef guardians. The pulse of Semporna town supplies boats, guides, and stories of legendary encounters, hammerheads at dawn, schools of tuna at noon. Even above the water, Sipadan's shoreline is a living laboratory where coral-derived sand and nesting turtles link island geology to fragile life cycles. Scientists and local rangers patrol the reefs, tagging turtles and monitoring coral health, while teaching visitors how to be temporary guests in a permanent world. To step into Sipadan's ocean is to enter a place where billions of interactions play out every minute, and where every dive can rewrite what you thought was possible beneath the waves. Cameron Highlands hosts some of the world's oldest tropical montane mossy forests, where cloud-drenched peaks nurture endemic species. Do you know the mossy forest of Cameron Highlands shelters rare Nepenthes pitcher plants and over 100 orchid species unseen elsewhere? Above the clouds, terraced tea gardens like BOH ripple across slopes, creating one of the few highland tea regions in Southeast Asia. Walk the narrow paths between emerald rows, and you'll find that the tea's flavor owes itself to elevation, mist frequency, and volcanic soil. From the tea estates, the landscape folds into vegetable plots and strawberry farms in Kia Farm, where cool nights coax intense flavors. Locals still handpick crisp lettuces and sun-warmed strawberries that draw busloads of visitors to the bustling market stalls. At dawn, farmers ferry their produce down winding roads towards settlements like Ringlet and Tanah Rata, linking highland life to lowland trade. This rural artery has shaped the highlands culture, blending indigenous Orang Asli traditions with British colonial tea heritage. Hike to Gunung Brinchang, and the panorama unfolds. Cloud seas, moss-draped trunks, and a landscape that seems stitched from different climates. The stone paths and boardwalks through the mossy forest are living museums, preserving plants adapted to perpetual moisture and cool air. Explore Time Tunnel Museum, and you glimpse how tin mining and colonial planters rewrote the Highlands story, connecting past to present. From historical echoes, we move to culinary surprises. Markets here serve everything from roasted mountain vegetables to creamy strawberry ice cream. Conservation efforts now balance tourism and fragile habitats, with guided trails and research stations monitoring endemic frogs and pitcher plants. Every visit helps fund habitat restoration, so your stroll through tea rows contributes to keeping rare species alive. As mist lifts in late afternoon, waterfalls tucked between ridges reveal themselves, adding rushing water to the highlands' layered soundscape. Night brings a chill, and the markets glow. Stories of original settlers mingle with the hiss of frying peppers and tea leaves. Leave Cameron Highlands, and you carry more than photographs. You carry an understanding of how elevation, climate, and culture crafted this fragile paradise. And when the road drops toward Ipoh, or the lowlands, the contrast is startling, underscoring why this cool island of greenery endures in Malaysia's heart. Rising like a twin spire of glass and stainless steel, the Petronas Twin Towers dominate Kuala Lumpur's skyline, with the world's tallest twin structure and a sky bridge at 170 meters that doubles as an engineering marvel. Dozens of countries send engineers and architects to study the tower's unique blend of Islamic geometric design and modern materials, a combination few skyscrapers attempt. Visitors step into an atrium where light funnels through latticed facades and day turns into a glittering city mosaic. From the observation deck, you can trace the arteries of KL, highways, river bends, and the neatly planted green of KLCCC Park, all arranged like a living map. The towers were built on an abandoned racecourse, their foundations sinking into bedrock and concrete to support over 76 meters of vertical load. That subterranean story connects to the city's transformation from colonial outpost to global metropolis, visible in the glass reflection of every neighboring building. Walk from the base through tree-lined promenades, and you're carried into a world where shopping malls meet art galleries and local hawkers sit in the shadow of international brands. The tower's podium houses exhibitions that chart Malaysia's oil-fueled modernization and aspirations for sustainable urban life. At night, the facade becomes a beacon, its rhythms of light echoing patterns found in Malaysian textiles and mosque architecture. That visual language ties the modern skyline to centuries-old cultural motifs, knitting together past and future in polished steel. Engineers will tell you the Sky Bridge isn't just for tourists. It functions as a structural brace that equalizes sway between the towers during storms. That practical brilliance links the towers to other inventive Malaysian landmarks where form follows urgent function, like the suspended walkways in tropical parks. From here, it's a short ride to Batu Caves, where limestone hills and Hindu shrines offer a completely different, vertical experience. The contrast between glittering steel and ancient stone shows how Kuala Lumpur lets modern icons and timeless landscapes stand side by side. Batu Caves limestone hill in Selangor holds cavern chambers sculpted over some 400 million years, a rare fossilized monument of tropical karst few cities can claim. Do you know the Cathedral Cave soars nearly 100 meters above its floor? And shelters fragile stalactites, bats and swiftlets that form an underground ecosystem visitors barely glimpse. Every year, pilgrims climb the 272 painted steps to pay homage beneath the towering 42.7-meter statue of Lord Murugan. Turning an ancient geological marvel into a living stage for one of the world's most intense religious processions. Far from a static monument, the caves are laboratories of time, where mineral flows freeze into draperies and columns, and small cave-adapted creatures trace routes invisible to hurried tourists. Local guides will tell you the limestone here is a fractured spine. Its narrow ridges and sinkholes feeding springs that became the lifeblood of early settlements in Gombak. Walk past the temple courtyards and you slip quickly from urban bustle. Into a patchwork of rainforest and cliffside trails that lead deeper into Selangor's karst landscapes. That transition explains why scientists come to Batu Caves as much for biodiversity surveys as photographers do for dramatic portraits of devotion. From the cool shade at the cave mouth, your route can follow the limestone north toward the Titiwangsa spine. Connecting this living shrine to Malaysia's broader mountain and forest systems. And when you climb down, the city that springs up around Batu Caves, street markets, brasswork vendors, and the aroma of prasadam reveals how culture and geology have braided together here for centuries. In that braided story lies a secret. Batu Caves is not merely a stop on a map. It's a hinge linking Kuala Lumpur's metropolitan pulse to the island nation's ancient season in deep forests, and the next chapter waits along the ridges. Menara Kuala Lumpur pierces the skyline at 421 meters, its needle-like antenna punctuating Kuala Lumpur's urban canopy and visible from far beyond the city limits. Do you know the tower is built atop Bukit Nanas, one of the oldest patches of tropical rainforest preserved inside a national capital? A living relic few other cities can claim. From the observation deck, visitors are lifted above the glass and steel forest to a panoramic crown where the city unfolds in every direction. An atlas of highways, rooftops, and hidden parks. At dusk, the lights of the Petronas Twin Towers, colonial domes, and sprawling neighborhoods stitch a luminous quilt below, and the tower transforms into both lookout and storyteller for that nightly spectacle. Inside Menara Kuala Lumpur, the revolving restaurant rotates slowly, so each table tastes the city as much as the chef's cuisine, offering meals that pair Malay, Chinese, and Indian flavors with ever-changing views. Below, the Bukit Nanas Reserve hums with cicadas, hornbills, and long-tailed macaques, a green orchestra that reminds you the metropolis literally grew out of living roots and canopy. Every year, the tower stages daring spectacles, stair races that test endurance, charity climbs that bind communities, and occasional base jumping exhibitions that flicker like controlled meteors. Those events turn an engineering landmark into a communal pulse, pulling together thrill seekers, families, and office workers, and making the tower feel like the city's vertical heartbeat. The tower's architecture borrows from Islamic geometry, with motifs and patterns echoing ornate arches seen in mosques and palaces, a deliberate visual conversation with Malaysia's cultural history. That design thread ties Menara Kuala Lumpur to the city's broader cultural map, making the structure a metal and concrete minaret that declares both modern ambition and respect for heritage. Either way, Menara Kuala Lumpur acts less like an isolated monument and more like a hinge that swings visitors between natural refuge, urban spectacle, and living culture across the city. Stand at that summit, and you begin to understand Kuala Lumpur's unusual geography. A capital that keeps a rainforest at its center, while racing ambitiously skywards, balancing green history and futuristic skylines. And when you descend, the connections remain tangible. The green and the glass, the ritual and the rush, all braided together by one slender tower that anchors the city's stories. On Penang's coastline, Malaysia cradles one of the few remaining urban mangrove forest mosaics, where tidal channels thread right up to Georgetown's colonial quays. Do you know that Georgetown's streets hide an ecological and cultural threshold where the mangroves, Penang Hills cloud forest, and the Strait of Malacca meet in ways that shaped its trade, food, and festivals? Walk Armenian Street, and you feel history pressed into the walls. Yet every mural and shophouse frame is part of a living island story that links Chinese clan jetties to sea-bound merchants. From clan jetties where wooden houses stand on stilts to the marble steps of Kek Lok Si, each neighborhood folds into the next, blurring sacred, domestic, and maritime lives. Georgetown's UNESCO inscription isn't just about architecture. It's about a syncretic urban ecosystem where food, faith, and biodiversity share a single doorway. Street hawkers on stalls under banyan trees serve recipes that arrived by centuries of sailors and migrants, flavors that trace roots between Penang Hill gardens and coastal fishermen. The Blue Mansion's indigo walls recall a merchant's cosmopolitan dreams, and just a tram ride away, Batu Caves sands remind you that this island balances commerce and quiet shoreline. Markets hum with Malay, Chinese, and Indian dialects, while spice-scented alleys lead to temples whose painted roofs mirror the colors of tropical birds in the nearby reserves. At dawn, fishermen untangle nets at the jetties, and temple bells answer the tide. A rhythm preserved even as boutique cafes map the old streets to new patrons. Every corner carries a story that pulls you onward, from the heritage trails under rusted signboards to hidden gardens perched atop shophouse roofs. Explore the narrow lanes, and you'll find puppet theaters and tin museums, each collection a strand tying Georgetown to the plantations up Penang Hill. These connections reveal why conservation here is not only about trees or buildings, but about preserving the living patterns that make the island resilient. When you stand at the waterfront and look back at the patchwork skyline, you see more than brick and paint. You see ecological corridors, sea lanes, and human stories braided together. And as you step through Georgetown's doorways, every mural, court, and kitchen becomes an invitation to follow these threads further into Penang's surprising interwoven landscape. Endau Rompin shelters one of the planet's oldest living tropical rainforests, aged over 100 million years. Its rounded granite hills rise like weathered sentinels and feed cold, clear streams that plunge into hidden waterfalls. Walkers who push beyond the ranger stations find waterfalls that tumble into jade pools, ringed by ferns and hornbills. In misty gullies, rock shelves create stepped cascades where generations of local tribes once harvested river fish by hand. The park's slopes are threaded with ridgelines that give autumn panoramic views, exposing folds of green that ripple to the horizon. Those ridges hide microclimates, where orchids and rare pitcher plants cling to damp bark and granite bluffs. Each waterfall has its own personality. Thunderous torrents after the monsoon, silk ribbons in the dry months, and secret pools warmed by sunlit clearings. Ancient trees lean over the water, their buttressed roots sculpting natural bridges and secret caves beneath the falls. Guides will tell you the hilltops sometimes trap cloud, creating an island of cooler air where mist becomes a living curtain. From these high vantage points, you can trace river channels as they carve valleys, folding the landscape like wet clay. The geology here is stubborn. Granite outcrops, piercing boulders worn into faces that seem to watch the forest pass. When the sun slides through the canopy, shafts of light turn spray from the falls into suspended diamonds. Wildlife slips through this watery labyrinth too. Elusive gaur browse along stream edges and colorful kingfishers dart over pools. For centuries, local communities have read the seasons by the sound of the waterfalls and the taste of the river's water. Tracks from Endau Rompin eventually meet lowland paths that lead toward the southern coast, where rivers widen and empty into the South China Sea. This connection turns the park into an inland arm of the coastline, linking misty highlands to the coral-studded shores beyond. Visiting here changes how you measure distance, not in miles, but by the number of river crossings and waterfalls you've counted. And as you step from the last cascade toward the trailhead, the distant call of the sea becomes a promise of islands still to explore. Mount Kinabalu in Sabah rises to 4,095 meters and hosts one of the richest concentrations of alpine plant species in the tropics, a rarity almost nowhere else on Earth. Do you know that Mount Kinabalu's granite slopes contain plant species found only within a few square kilometers, and that some flowers live at elevations where tropical mountains usually have long since given way to snow? Climbers often speak of daylight that feels sharpened, but below that high drama lie valleys where rhododendrons explode into color and pitcher plants catch insects with uncanny efficiency. The mountain's sacred status to indigenous Kadazan Dusun people means its peaks are stitched into myths, and for centuries, no one climbed without respect to those old traditions. A biological marvel unfolds along every trail. Orchids appear like jewels, ferns tower in architectural patterns, and several species are both newly discovered and critically endangered. Scientists have cataloged more than 5,000 plant species on Kinabalu Park, And this vertical library of life includes mosses and lichens that form carpets on rocks and trees. Weather changes so quickly that cloud forests can vanish into sunlight within an hour, creating microclimates where evolution experiments run wildly different at short distance. If you listen at dawn, you might hear the calls of endemic birds and small mammals that have adapted exclusively to Kinabalu's slopes, living nowhere else on the planet. Even the geology tells a strange story. The granite summit is a fragment of ancient continental crust uplifted and exposed, giving climbers both harsh rock and surprising outcrops of ancient life. Yet modern threats, from warming temperatures to increased tourist pressure, are squeezing those specialized species into ever smaller refuges, turning global patterns of change into local emergencies. In this episode, we'll trace a single seed's journey from valley to peak to reveal how isolation, elevation, and human history have shaped Kinabalu's living tapestry. We'll walk from the lowland trails to the summit ridge, meet plant hunters and village elders, and uncover why conservation here matters for ecosystems across Southeast Asia. By the end, you may see Mount Kinabalu not just as a climbing challenge, but as a compact arc of biodiversity, whose fate signals much larger changes. Prepare to discover strange plants that glow in unexpected ways, mountain rituals that survived colonial mapping, and scientific surprises that still puzzle experts. This is Kinabalu's story, both fragile and fiercely alive, and it begins with a single step up its ancient granite face. Kek Lok Si Temple in Penang crowns a rainforest-clad hill, where temple roofs seem to float above the treetops, a rare fusion of sacred architecture and tropical landscape. Do you know that during Chinese New Year, the whole complex is lit with tens of thousands of lanterns, turning the hillside into a shimmering constellation, visible from across the island? Begin at the ornate entrance, where stone guardian lions and red banners lead pilgrims up a series of carved stairways toward cascading halls of worship. Each step reveals new craftsmanship: ceramic tiled roofs, gilded Buddha statues tucked into alsfiefs, and prayer wheels that click softly as devotees pass. The heart of Kek Lok Si is the Pagoda of 10,000 Buddhas, an architectural hybrid whose layered eaves carry inscriptions and reliefs brought by artisans, from across Southeast Asia. From its terraces you can gaze down at a quilt of banana palms and coconut groves, and in the distance the blue of the Malacca Strait. Nearby, a graceful pavilion shelters the statue of Guanyin, the goddess of mercy, where worshippers leave ribbons and lotus offerings. At dusk, the statue is backlit, and the entire assembly becomes a silent theater of devotion and light. Wandering the pathways, you'll find small shrines dedicated to Taoist and Mahayana figures, a reminder that Kek Lok Si is a living mosaic of faiths. Monks in saffron and visitors in every language cross paths as incense curls through a canopy of tropical leaves. The temple's terraced gardens are home to koi ponds and lush plantings that cool the air, offering moments of quiet between the echo of temple bells. Local artisans sell hand-painted prayer plaques and Dao talismans, linking centuries-old rituals with the island's contemporary craft scene. From Kek Lok Si, you can descend into the lively streets of Air Town, where hawker stalls and spice markets continue the sensory story of Penang. For the curious traveler, the temple offers workshops and volunteer opportunities that reveal how clay molds become guardian figures and how calligraphy accompanies prayer. Every visit reveals a new detail: a hand-painted mural tucked behind bamboo, a bell with a centuries-old inscription, or a monk's smile that bridges language. And when you stand on the highest terrace, the view folds Penang into one panorama: temples, rooftops, and the far-off glint of ships on the sea, reminding you why Kek Lok Si remains an essential heartbeat of the island. One of the world's largest man-made urban wetland systems sits within Putrajaya, making Malaysia unusual for having a capital where engineered freshwater marshes double as wildlife refuges. Do you know that the Putrajaya wetlands were designed to purify and cool the city's water, and now host an astonishing variety of migratory and resident birdlife that few expect to find near government offices? Walking from the wetlands, the city unfolds across shimmering Putrajaya Lake, an artificial mirror that connects parks, bridges, and government monuments. The lake's calm surface reflects the pink domes of Putra Mosque and the green turrets of Perdana Putra, turning every boat crossing into a study of architecture and reflection. Putra Mosque sits on the lake's edge with rose-tinged stone and intricate mosaics, blending Persian, Islamic, and local Malay motifs into a singular silhouette. Opposite it, Perdana Putra houses Malaysia's executive offices beneath a stately dome, its manicured terraces flowing toward promenades and public gardens. From governmental grandeur, the narrative moves to human scale at the Botanical Garden and the Taman Wetlands boardwalks, where mangroves, lotus ponds, and shaded trails invite quiet observation. Birdwatchers trading the hush of reeds for sudden movement will find kingfishers, herons, and seasonal visitors that migrate along precisely this green corridor. The city's bridges are more than infrastructure. Each is an architectural statement, linking civic function with sculptural beauty. Seri Wawasan Bridge curves like a modern sculpture, while Putra Bridge echoes graceful arches, and crossing them reveals new vantage points over water and sky mice. Beyond the photographed monuments, tucked plazas and shaded walkways host local stalls and cafes where public servants and families meet after office hours. Sampling waterfront specialties, from spicy satay skewers to refreshing cendol, shows how Putrajaya was planned for governance and daily life together. At dawn, the city reveals another secret. A soft mist lifts from the wetlands, veiling modern facades and turning the administrative center into a living landscape. This deliberate interface between engineered systems and natural cycles is what makes Putrajaya uniquely Malaysian, a capital that functions as an ecological experiment as much as a seat of power. Even the lighting and planting schemes were chosen to minimize disturbance to nocturnal wildlife while creating dramatic vistas for visitors. The careful choreography of urban systems, biodiversity, and public space offers a blueprint for other tropical capitals grappling with growth and climate challenges. From Putrajaya, our path flows outward toward heritage districts and the forested outskirts, a reminder that Malaysia's story constantly moves between crafted order and ancient wildness. Next, we will trace those connections, following designed rivers into natural ones and discovering how one planned city bridges modernity with nature. Langkawi's Kilim Karst Geoforest Park shelters rare mangrove labyrinths and sheer limestone towers, one of the world's few island geoparks that preserves both ancient fossils and living coastal forests. Do you know that Langkawi in Malaysia hosts flying fox colonies and peat swamp habitats so unique they support species found nowhere else on the planet? Emerald seas lap at hidden bays like Tanjung Ru and Pantai Chenang, where shifting tides reveal secret sandbars and braided mangrove channels. And rising like a backbone, Mount Mat Singkang's cable car and the sweeping sky bridge deliver vertiginous panoramas that link the island's lowland wetlands to its rugged central peaks. trace the island's human story, from the legend-steeped Masuri tomb to fishermen's stilt houses, each stitched into a landscape shaped by tectonic uplift and millennia of sea level change. Langkawi's karst towers are perforated with caves that cradle underground streams and freshwater pools, inviting swimmers to duck beneath dripping stalactites. White-bellied sea eagles wheel above, while dusky macaques and playful long-tailed macaques dart through shaded forests, and cave mouths conceal vast bat colonies. Killam's limestone cliffs nurture rare endemic plants and mudflats, where migratory shorebirds pause on epic journeys, creating living threads that connect Langkawi to distant wetlands. Boat trips wind through mangrove canyons to the freshwater lake of the Pregnant Maiden on Pulau Dayang Bunting, a mythical inland lake framed by jungle. Those same excursions stitch Langkawi's geopark into the wider archipelago, from coral-fringed isles to vibrant snorkel sites where reefs quietly thrive. At dawn, dolphin pods slice through misty channels, while mudskippers and fiddler crabs stage tiny dramas along tangled routes, and communities now balance tourism with conservation. Remarkably, Langkawi is one of only a handful of island UNESCO Global Geoparks on Earth, where geology, biodiversity, and folklore are legally recognized together. Hidden waterfalls like Tamuran and jungle trails up to Gunung Raya invite explorers deeper, linking freshwater springs to the coastal seascape. Step by step, Langkawi reveals how an island can be a microcosm, where stone, sea, and story braid across every inlet and ridge, connecting this place to the wider Malaysian archipelago. We close this journey beneath the shadow of Mount Kinabalu, where alpine orchids grow nowhere else on Earth. From there, we traced the limestone arteries of Mulu's caves and felt the hush of underground rivers that rewrite what we thought caves could be. We moved from jungle cathedrals into Penang's riot of flavors, where each street stall preserves a recipe older than the nation itself. A sip of Cameron Highlands tea bridged colonial terraces to native plantations, showing how altitude sculpts taste as surely as it shapes valleys. In Taman Negara, we listened to the rainforest's calendar of rain and discovered trails trodden by ancestors and tigers alike. Langkawi's mangroves and karsts revealed a geological memory that links sea to ski and science to legend. Across to Borneo, we met the slow, watchful eyes of orangutans and learned how every conservation choice echoes across ecosystems. At Sipadan, corals bloom like underwater cities, reminding us the ocean keeps its own laws of beauty and fragility. Malacca's streets showed us how space, religion, and empire layered histories into living architecture. Kuching and the rainforests around it taught us that culture and wilderness are not separate chapters, but overlapping pages of the same book. What ties these places is not just geography, but a long habit of adaptation, people and nature shaping one another across islands, mountains, and shorelines. If you leave with a single image, let it be of a place that holds many faces, each one stranger and more generous the closer you look.